Hello friends, I hope you're doing really well, and welcome back to this series on making sure we've covered the basics of the early foundations of recovery. So last week we talked a little bit about doing your own assessment, like how did we get here, and really having a clear understanding, because if you don't understand, start to at least have at least a bird's eye view of the function of restricting, binging, purging, pills, potions, whatever, to try to suppress weight, or binging to fill a void. If you don't understand that that's what you're doing, and maybe why that made sense at some point in your life, but maybe it doesn't now. If you don't understand that, we tend to get so behavior focused, and not that behavior change isn't important, but we get so put all our efforts there that we white knuckle really hard to never make a mistake with the behaviors. And then when we have a hard time, or a certain kind of time of the year rolls around, or certain kinds of reminders to our nervous system physiology that we don't feel safe, all that effort, it just feels like, well, what did I do all that for? I can't maintain it. So we're looking to do something different, which is provide safety and compassion. And if you're not curious, compassionate, have some courage to be able to look at why you might feel unsafe inside, why that's overcoupled with food and associated with food, why it maybe makes sense that happened. It's really hard to reparent all that, right, within ourselves. So this video, that's what that video was about. This video, if you haven't watched that, please go and watch it. You can do it on YouTube, whatever. So this video is going to be about a way in which we can get the truth. And here, if you watch this channel, we're big on truth in terms of what is the body actually saying. And one way that people often feel like they're not really getting a lot of traction in recovery is they're not eating enough and they don't know it. Because some part of the mind kind of knows they're not quite eating enough, that they're pushing off meals, or they're leaving some food, or their mind will use a lot of different reasons that they don't have time to eat, or that they're too busy to pack or to make it a priority. And that will cause them maybe not quite in your front mind, conscious mind, that you're still restricting, even though it's not as overt as counting calories anymore, or macros, or whatever you were used to doing. Okay, but a lot of people avoid looking at that because they think if they look at it, that means they're being obsessed, which is why people avoid food journaling. And that's the topic of today's video, is that all a food journal is, from a non-diet dietitian's perspective and a non-diet coach's perspective, would be, what time did you eat? What did you eat? The best you can from your hunger, fullness, if you can tell, or what is your meal planning to be if your interoceptive awareness isn't very intact yet. And then what was happening, because I need to know what's happening around what you're thinking about with your eating, whether it's circumstances around your eating that are maybe either helping you feel safe, not safe. Your thoughts are making you feel about food and body, are making you either feel safe or unsafe. Because if you're in unsafety, that means that you're going to misread cues. You're going to have a whole cascade of physiologic experiences, less ability to digest food, more GI distress, taste and appetite changes. You're going to have a lot of stuff happen, and you start to think this is who you are and this is how you are, and you're just in a threat response, and your body isn't quite it's not in the optimal digest zone. So which means you're going to struggle with your food and blame the food. I can't tell you how many people felt like they had pretty severe food reactions and allergies, and really when we just got some more safety on board and started renewing the mind, they didn't have any problems with a bigger variety of food. Now that's not always the case, but most of the time we have found that it is. How would we have known that though if there wasn't any food journaling? So the next thing here is whenever we talk to people about food journaling, I say, oftentimes I find that typically people get better a little faster if they do food journal, because you can capture these moments. You can capture some nuanced truth in these moments. However, most of us don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it either, because I felt like I had spent so many years micromanaging my food, criticizing my food. I was projecting on anybody who would ever look at this notebook of scribbles about food, that they'd be thinking I was crazy and judging me and thinking I ate too much or whatever. So oftentimes we see food journals as a surveillance tool to get in trouble or to be shamed. And in this non-diet, trauma-informed kind of approach here, we are trying to just look at like it's a archaeological scene here, and we're trying to figure out like what happened, why did something go well, and can we keep doing that? And if something was really hard, well, what made it hard? Is it something inside us, something out in the environment? What does it mean, so that we can find a appropriate maybe solution for that if we can? And almost all the time, usually when I look at food journals and there is some like very subtle unconscious under eating, it's 80 to 100% of the reason why people are deprivation driven eating, maybe even binge eating, because one, there's a caloric deficit, and two, there's also a part inside that feels like even the accidental under eating feels like they're going to be neglected again and not get fed. So there's like a ping pong reaction to that. And sometimes good and well people know that they're glad they missed some food and they're hoping it makes them lose weight. And that's also internally triggering you as well, to possibly another part that, again, feels really humiliated by thinking that I don't get my needs met based on how I look. Well, that's ridiculous, or that's painful and hurtful, and it makes them feel shame. So they just want to eat to like prove that they can, or prove that nobody can take their food now, including themselves, or all kinds of reasons. So that stuff shows up on food journals, which is so valuable. But I get it. The reasons we don't run after, like, let's get after it with that information, because we still have to work through these layers of meaning, usually about what a food journal means. It means that I'm going to be criticized. It means that I'm going to be really seen. And maybe that's the terror in itself, is just being seen, because being seen got you hurt or whatever happened. And so we take it slow with those things. And sometimes I might not food journal for people for a while, and we're relying on some memory. But eventually, I want people to have the truth about, honestly, how good they might be doing with their food, or see the places where they have blind spots or interoceptive. There's some stuff going on that, like, unless we have the whole picture, it's just hard to know why it's happening. And it's definitely figure outable. So that's the good news. And sometimes it helps us figure out if there's actual food intolerances, if there is actually the food's looking really good and your symptoms really aren't a match for how you're eating. And this could be something else that, like, medically, it helps us help you get to maybe the right other practitioner if you need it. So there's a lot that we do with that. So let's say that you're on board with this. You hear this, you're like, okay, like, I'm willing to try. And it's best if it's probably best if you feel like that, if right now, let's say you're not seeing a non-diet dietitian, you really need to be, but you're not for whatever reason. And if you're using this as an accountability tool to make sure that you don't eat too little, that's great. And I have, it's called an attuned eating toolkit. And so I have a lot of tools that go with it. It's like an 11-page document that really, it's not just hunger fullness work and not just a food journal. It's a whole bunch of stuff to help you get more discernment and have more tools to use these tools in a way that's a lot more compassionate. So please get that. It's free. But so regardless, let's say that, like, you're able to write it down and you're able to look at it and be compassionate. That's really great. But maybe you're somebody who's struggling. If I really write down the amount of cereal I have, then I hear all this flooding of judgment and all this stuff, and I get really overwhelmed. So maybe now you don't do that. Maybe now you're just like, breakfast, 8 a.m. Maybe you just put hunger and fullness, or maybe you just, maybe you don't write amounts. You can maybe draw a picture if you wanted to. Again, this is saying if you're doing paper. There's other apps, there's Recovery Record that you could put all this stuff in there too. If you needed at the end of each day to be able to get some concrete evidence, because your mind might be saying that you ate too much, and you look back at this like, this is not too much food. I can see that in, like, evidence. And sometimes that's what we need to stay on track. We need the evidence that sometimes some of the thoughts we have aren't in alignment with what's happening inside our bodies. The same thing is important for people. Maybe you're not struggling as much with restricting. Maybe you mostly have diet thoughts and you want to be, but you're not. you just need to look at this, because most people that I work with who are binge eating still have restrictive thoughts. They still think their body's bad. They still think they're eating out of control. They still don't think they don't have enough willpower. Well, that creates a lot of feelings when you talk to yourself that way. It's quite judgmental, condemning, and cruel. And I think that will pull you out of some of your interoceptive awareness when you're over here internally dealing with the bad feelings you're having about how your mind's talking to you, or how you're afraid somebody else is going to talk about you with your food. So those are things to catch, and just recognizing that sometimes your eating can just be more peaceful if there's a way to catch your thoughts. So again, you can make shorthand. I've had lots of people put sticky notes over their meals. They can't look at it, like their own writing about what they ate, because they feel like if they see it, they won't eat dinner, or they won't eat the next day. They'll try to compensate, depending on what stage of recovery and how's your capacity. But some people write stuff down, put a sticky note over it like it didn't happen, move on, move on, move on. And then you're really kind of just staying focused on what you need to do. It's just like people like who in this process, I'm not going to weigh myself. Same thing with this. Maybe you're eating what you need to be eating, and you have support to be doing that appropriately. And you just kind of like write it down and let it go. Same thing. I'm not going to weigh myself. I'm just going to do what I know I need to be doing is right, and let it go. All right. So, and in the day, sometimes people don't write down their food. They wrote down that they ate, but that's all I get. But I have a lot of information about the nervous system state, and about like the thoughts about food, like diet thoughts, diet rules, old diet rules from the 80s, health stuff, whatever, that helps us kind of see before they even started eating the meal, if this was happening, how did that impact their hunger and fullness? And eventually people can kind of get to the place where everything starts to match and line up, hunger, fullness wise. And you start to see where you need to be putting some of your tools, where a lot more packing work needs to go in sessions, whether with us or therapy or whatever you're doing. But you just start to see where, honestly, you're doing great. You're doing better than you think. And then you're starting to see places where it's like you're feeling kind of stuck, or there's a lot of hesitance to move forward, and you can't force it. You just need to understand it. So then you get to make the decision but how we want to face this. So I hope this was helpful. All these videos for the next couple of weeks are going to be like these basic things. If you're not sure where you're at, and you're hearing a lot of, what am I doing wrong? Why is this taking so long? Why is this so hard? What's going on with my food? Well, we need to look at it. You can't just kind of, sometimes it's too hard to keep it all inside here and expect yourself. It's almost like, you have a ball of yarn and you have like 10,000 little different colored strands, and you set it right here. And it's kind of hard to pull them all apart if they're right up in you, almost inside you, versus if you set the ball of yarn here in front of you, so you can see it and you can turn it and you can look at it to kind of figure out like, where's the first thread that's best, that's going to get me some momentum here. This is what our histories and sometimes even food journaling will do sometimes. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to do all that. If you don't have the capacity, don't do it. No need to overwhelm yourself. But if you're like, I just need to see the truth, it's going to be okay. I might not like it all, but I want what's on the other side of that. So hope that's helpful for you today. We're going to continue on, I think, next week, and just look at my ideas. And again, I know that sometimes I change my mind, but it looks like next week, if I can turn the page here. Yeah, we're going to talk about body image stories. I know it's not easy, but it's necessary. So we'll be talking about that next week as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.